isn't it?
Yeah.
You're now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. For the first time ever, we have a Chelsea fan on the show. I'm here with Connor Holden to discuss Noni Madueke. I wanted to get an expert opinion. Connor's someone that I really respect his opinion. I've followed him on Twitter for a long time. He's got his own YouTube channel as well, and I'm really pleased to have him here. Connor, how are you doing?
I'm good. Different audience for me today, talking to Arsenal fans. So let's see how it goes. But at least it's about Chelsea players. So hopefully I can give you a little bit more of an in-depth idea of what you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before we started recording, this is the most we've ever seen Chelsea flags on this channel. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to this chat. But first up, tell me, why do Chelsea want to sell Noni Madueke? Or is this a case of him agreeing in terms with Arsenal and Arsenal approaching Chelsea as opposed to you actively trying to sell?
Yeah, I think we've been looking. It's a weird one with Madueke because it felt like last season there was a chance that he could go. Newcastle were looking at him as well. Even this summer, there was sort of rumours before the season ended that Newcastle were going to be back in for him. So it's sort of been one of those ones where, of the wingers at Chelsea, he was one that teams had interest in. And I think it's one of those things with Chelsea where if you're not Caicedo, you're not Palmer, then you're kind of on the chopping block if the right price comes in. And I think that the disparity is sort of comes to what the price would be. I think that if they're to sell at like 50, 55, for me, it feels like a mixture of the arrival of Esteval. I'm not sure how much you guys know about him coming through, 18-year-old Brazilian, ridiculously talented, and like it's paid a lot of money for him. So I think they want to give him the best pathway possible. But I think also the fact that maybe they think after 2.5 seasons, if you can get around 55 million, maybe that's where the risk/reward is at its sort of peak. Whereas maybe for me, for example, when the price was touted at around 40 to 45 million, that wasn't enough, in my opinion, to take the risk of him exploding at Arsenal. So I think it's all about price. But yeah, I think Esteval has quite a big factor as to why Chelsea would be so willing to sell him.
Yeah, well, interestingly, I saw a report from Matt Law probably about a week ago that he said that Chelsea were looking to start the season with 9 attackers, which is wild. And that plays into it as well. You've got another arriving, Estavio, however you pronounce it. But yeah, he's someone that he's obviously hugely rated everywhere. He's been talked up. Chelsea won a big battle to get him to the club. And I think they're going to make sure that you basically create the best pathway possible for this talent. Obviously, João Pedro's come in as well. But when you look at the wingers that Chelsea have, where would you rank Madueke in terms of performance? Because you've just mentioned 40 to 45 wouldn't have been enough for you to sell. But actually, that figure is causing a lot of angst within Arsenal fans because they don't like that figure. So where does this one sit? Because it feels like there's real disparity between how people rate this player.
Yeah, and I think that's just a world, like a football thing in general. I don't think that's just a Chelsea fan thing. I don't think that's just an Arsenal fan thing. I think a lot of people they're a bit don't know what to think about Madueke, and he's a bit of a strange one to judge because I think his underlying numbers all suggest that he's sort of on the brink of that next step up. And where I'm at with the 40 million mark is that I think that would have been too cheap to take that risk. Whereas say 55 to 60, and I think that you're getting a little bit more sort of, okay, if he does explode, at least you've got that higher fee. In terms of where he ranks for the wingers last season, for me, and again, this could be different for other Chelsea fans because, like you've said, he's a divisive figure. But for me, he was our best winger amongst him, Pedro Neto, and Sancho, and then even Mudryk before the sort of December mark. He was our best winger. He was our most effective winger in terms of output. He scored the most goals in the Premier League, which is something that we have lacked from wide areas for a little while, if you don't include Cole Palmer's stint on the right back in 23-24. So in terms of what he can offer, he was very much sort of the output guy for our wingers last season, which is why for me he was worth a little bit more than that figure that we've sort of the 40 million. However, I do see it from the Arsenal perspective because I think a lot of people, when they first look at that transfer, will see he played right wing a lot for Chelsea, and of course you've got Bukayo Saka. So I think that's where a lot of that sort of thinking sort of stems from.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the figure that was being reported by Romano is kind of 50 all in. So that could be 40 plus 10, 45 plus 5, whatever. We don't know. And with add-ons, as Chelsea fans will know very well, given that that's how a lot of your deals are structured, we don't know the makeup of those add-ons, those structures. A lot of them tend to be you win a trophy, you win a title. Trossard, for example, when he came to Arsenal, it was reported that part of that those add-ons were Arsenal winning the Premier League. So Arsenal have never paid that. And if you get a player like Madueke, the expectation would be if we're adding him along with Gyökeres and others, we're going to win a title and Chelsea will get paid that. To be honest, if Arsenal win something with this player, I don't care what we pay for him. But it's very much one of those that it kind of fits within a jigsaw and what else we can do. So I think the price does kind of matter this summer. But you mentioned the other wingers Chelsea have. Neto's someone that you paid quite a lot of money for last summer, and a lot of Arsenal fans went into meltdown that we didn't get him. But I think it's safe to say that he hasn't hit the levels expected of him. And that leads to my next question. Is it an environment problem at Chelsea? Because whilst you finish top four, you're a club that have been used to winning title after title after title, finishing top two, top three, and very much being in the latter stages of the Champions League, not winning the Conference League. And you look at some of these players and they're all 23 and under. It's such a young squad. And yes, there's talent there, but there's very few senior figures for these players to look up to. So do you think that could be part of the problem with a Madueke, given that Neto, Sancho and Mudryk have all faced, I guess, mixed times at Chelsea?
Yeah, I think just quickly on Neto, like he struggled in his first season very much, but he's coming into his own a little bit now. So that's nice to see. With Madueke, on the other hand, I think what you touched on there in terms of the age profile of the squad is quite key with him, because the character that he is, I think he's quite a big character, and he's very the way I see it with Madueke, he's got an ego, but not in the worst way. I think it can be honed in, but within a Chelsea group that is so young, there was points last season. I don't know if you remember the penalty incident where Madueke and Jackson, and they're all trying to get the ball off each other, and I think it's that age thing where, like you say, there's not anyone to sort of put their arm around the player and really sort of take them under their wing. Whereas I do think at Arsenal, or just another club in general, maybe you can hone that ego a little bit and actually use it more for good, because I don't think it's a bad trait for him to have, as I'll mention in a little bit, some of his strengths. I think that is actually something that plays into quite a few of his strengths, but it's just one of those things where if in the wrong environment, and that's not to say Chelsea was the wrong environment overall for him, it's just I think that he could have done with somebody to sort of put their arm on him and just calm him down a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I say the environment at Chelsea, but I do think he's improved quite a bit over the last two seasons since he's gone to Chelsea. I think it's 2.5 years he's been there. He arrived in January. Because I was surprised when Chelsea went for him. I thought he was a really, really talented player at PSV, but he was always injured. And I'd been following him out there purely because I wanted Spurs to have lost a gem. And he was one of those that I was paying a lot of attention to, but he was just always out injured. And even at Chelsea, he has had injury problems. Do you think that's a factor in his development? Because Chelsea were very much in the mix for, I guess, the title, top four. And then he got injured, Jackson got injured, and your form really dipped off. So what do you think of his injury record, and how much do you think that injury impacted your season during that period?
Overall, his injury record since arriving has actually been quite improved. Like he's had a few sort of injuries here and there. I think in the 23-24 season, he had like one that kept him out for a month or so. Same with this season, he had that injury in around March that kept him out for a month, which was quite important, like you say, to our season. Had a few bad results tail off of his injury, with him and Jackson being out at the same time. But I think it has actually improved a little bit, and that durability has become a little bit better for what he can offer, especially when you consider the way that he sort of plays and that he has to ride a lot of contact at times in terms of physicality with defenders and beating his man. So I do actually think he's improved in that aspect, and it wouldn't be something that I would say has massively deterred his development overall. I think if anything, his development was kind of a little bit slow in the sense of he had a lot of different managers, of course, as is always been the case with Chelsea, really. But even in this new regime, he's had a lot of different managers. He's was sort of out of favour with Poch until the back end of the season. And then even this season, it's really his first full season of being in the Chelsea first team and actually being relied upon as one of the first team starting players. So in that sense, I think he's actually had a really good year to kick on in the amount he has in comparison to the other seasons, because I think it's easy to group it as 2.5 years that Noni Madueke has been at Chelsea. But I think when you actually break it down as to how much game time he's got under each different manager with different roles and how he's sort of fared with those, like I said, I think the development this year is quite significant.
That's interesting to hear, because I was looking at some of his numbers and you mentioned the development. But one of the big things that I noticed was in 23-24, he had 2.5 shots a game. That went up to over 3.5 per game last season. That's a big jump for a player. How much do you think that's down to Maresca's coaching versus Pochettino's coaching versus, I guess, natural improvement as he's got slightly older and got more game time?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of everything, really. I think with Poch, it was quite chaotic, the play. So there was a lot of space for him to move in. And I think those shot numbers would have still been a lot higher. But again, he wasn't always in favour under Poch. And he kind of had to work his way back into that team in quite adverse sort of times, with Pochettino not really liking his attitude and his work rate at the time. He worked really hard to get back in, became a little bit more sort of favoured within Poch's system towards the end. And I think we saw a little bit better from him from that. Under Maresca, though, where he's sort of pinned out wide and he's sort of given that license to go 1v1 and be really direct, I think he's been given that license to just create and sort of use that to his strength and really take those shots on. So I think that a lot of that is sort of the onus that's been put on him, and almost what Maresca's instilled into him as, like, when we get that ball out to you, we want you to go and push and be direct and get shots off, put crosses into the box, drive at defenders. So I do think Maresca and his system in general, how it empowers wingers, has been quite a key part of that increasing numbers for Madueke.
And you mentioned his strength and his ability to ride tackles, how often he gets kicked in games and so on. What do you think of his physical strength? Because he is, I guess, mechanically a bit awkward. So what way would you rate him there? If you compare him to the likes of Bukayo Saka, even Gabriel Martinelli, any of the wingers we've got, he's very different physically, and he isn't the most aesthetically pleasing to watch, but he is very accurate in the way he can force a line back, the way he really goes at his man, and almost a bit of the relentlessness that he's got in his game for his head not to drop and for him to go for that fifth dribble of the game.
Yeah, exactly that. This is something that I've always referred to as the goldfish trait in wingers. I think having that ability to, if you fail 3, 4, 5 times, you'll go again because you trust in your ability to make one of them happen. And all it takes is that one key dribble, that one shot or cross, and you can change the game completely. So I think that's something that Madueke has in abundance, really, that confidence in himself. As I said, that ability to ride tackles. I think something that he does really well is sort of, as he gets ahead of players, he'll shift his sort of leg, his thigh across the defender and get in front. And often he can sort of put them off balance as he drives inside. And it really allows him to get inside the box and really just, again, absorb that contact when he's driving with the ball. So I think that's one of his key strengths, and he can do that from both sides. So I think that's something that he'll really add to you, because Saka and Martinelli, as you say, I think they're a little bit more aesthetically pleasing in terms of their precision dribbling. I think Madueke offers a different type of just direct and really looking to power through players, whereas Saka, maybe they're trying to be a little bit more evasive and try and sort of find their way and wriggle their way through those gaps.
Yeah, and just on his attitude as well, because that's something that you've mentioned a couple of times. It's very widely reported. And this is something that always, I guess, troubles me a bit with players, because we hear attitude, but actually with Madueke, I saw Poch criticize it, but then Maresca basically called him to work harder and then praised him later in the season because of how hard he worked to come back from that. There's the penalty incidents that you referenced, but again, it was Gallagher that came and broke the two of them up and handed Palmer the ball, and he was one of the more senior players. What is the attitude issue? Is it just a case of this is a young player that maybe needs to have someone put an arm around him and work a bit harder? Or is there an issue with teammates? What does it actually mean in terms of what you've heard as a Chelsea fan?
Yeah, I think the similarities between sort of Poch and with Maresca that we've sort of heard with Madueke is, I think, on the training ground, sometimes he can let up a bit. But I don't fully think, especially with Maresca and the comments that we've heard from him, I think it is more to do with that they expect so much from him because they've seen how good he actually can be, that then if it starts to then drop a little bit, they almost feel like they have to push him that little bit harder. And I think Maresca's even said he sometimes feels like Madueke is the sort of player that you need to give a little push and a little bit of a nudge. And again, I think that rather than being like a huge attitude issue, I think it is just a thing with him that he's got such high confidence, and I think sometimes it can just slip and almost come across as, I don't know what the word would be, but like not nonchalant, but like very sort of he believes in himself and he can just sort of ride with the wave. So that could sometimes affect how high his work rate is. But I do think, again, in the right environment with a lot of leaders around him who are really going to get on at him, I do think that can more or less eradicate to quite a high level. I don't think it would be a huge issue.
Yeah, and with I guess the ego side, because you mentioned that and you mentioned the positivities of this, I kind of think Arsenal lack a few cocky players that are a bit more ballsy, that'll do things that get people off their seat. And Madueke is a player that isn't scared to shoot. I mentioned the shot numbers per game. Is there a greediness there? And do you think it's a problem or do you think this is a positive?
I would say yes, there is a slight greediness, but again, I think it's kind of a positive. And I was looking at your numbers points as well, and I think with Madueke and then Gyökeres and Eze, another two players that are linked, all three of them have much higher shot volume than Saka, Havertz, Martinelli, Trossard. So I think that is something that you clearly lack, is that sort of shot volume. I think you ranked sixth for shots per game in the Prem this year. So again, not up there with sort of the top two or three where you are in other metrics. So I do think it's something that you clearly need to add. Does it mean that sometimes he could play a pass in where maybe he doesn't see it and he's going a little bit tunnel vision? Sure. But I do think a lot of those top end sort of goal scoring wingers who transition to become that and really have that instinct for goal. You look at Salah, I think even at points in his sort of deadliest seasons, and by the way, before I get pelters, I'm not comparing Madueke to Salah in quality, but I think that where you get that instinct, sometimes you won't see the same pass that another player would see who's a little bit more pass first oriented. But I do think when it's something that your squad needs, then it is really important. And I think that's something when he was out injured that we spoke about, that period of time where he went down injured. It was something that we really lacked. I think we had Neto and Sancho on the wing, who they're very both pass first oriented. They're not very shoot heavy. That their tendencies to shoot aren't great. And again, with Jackson out the team as well, we really lacked shots other than Cole Palmer. So that was something that you clearly saw was missing when Madueke was out.
Well, he hit around 25 of his 80 shots with his right foot last season. I think he had 7 headers and the rest were with his left. How would you rate his two-footedness?
Yeah, it's something he's been working on. You keep seeing these sort of training videos, even last summer. It looks like he's working really hard to get that right foot to a higher standard in terms of cutting inside on it, but also just for crossing, because I think he realized that to give him that sort of two-way so that teams can't show him onto his left, show him on the outside, to stop him cutting inside on his stronger left foot from the right wing. It is something that I would flag in terms of it does need that continued sort of development. I think in terms of crossing, it has improved. I think sometimes when he's cutting inside off that left wing, which he's played a little bit for Chelsea this season towards the end, I do think he can be a little bit more hesitant to take that shot on that right foot. So I think that's where sort of it needs that extra little bit of work if he's going to be playing more regularly on that left side.
Yeah, well, as well, mentioning the left side, he played 7 games there last season, no goals, no assists. His chance creation numbers were down. Was that like very evident when you were watching him play that it was a different role for him? Or was that a case of the team weren't in as good of a place at that time? Or what was the reason for him dropping off so drastically in terms of his creation and goal scoring numbers?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mixture. Like he is unsettled on that side in comparison to when he was on the right. It was something that he has done for the England under 21s. And I think he may have done it a little bit at PSV as well. But it's not sort of something that is very natural to him. He's more of a right winger cutting inside on that left foot. That's what you've become accustomed to seeing with Madueke. He had a very good game against Everton on the left, where he cut inside, had Pickford made 2 really good saves, where he cut inside, shot it with his right foot and draw 2 really good saves. So it's not that he hasn't had good games from that side. I think the key area where, again, needs a little bit of improvement or at least some coaching details to sort of help him in this aspect is he's quite easy currently to pin outside on his left foot, where he's sort of, you can trap him quite easily to continue down and take him towards the byline. And he sometimes struggles to find his way back inside. And I do think that is, again, a preference to dribble with his left foot and a preference to shift the ball with his left foot rather than sort of using his right foot to manipulate his way inside to the box. Again, not that he won't do it at all, but I think it's just one of those things that needs to be brushed up on a little bit. But I think Arteta, especially with his wingers, has shown that he can really apply those coaching details in terms of bringing them and where he wants them to receive to sort of take it on the inside and spin inside or go on the outside. I think that's the sort of thing that he could actually help Madueke with in terms of developing his game on the left wing.
Yeah, well, quite often we will play that pass from Timber or Ben White and it goes infield rather than down the line. And it allows our winger to start drifting in, and it gives an option for someone like Odegaard to go on the outside. But with Madueke, one of the things that I wonder is, what is his ability like whenever he does go runs down the line? Is he kind of one of those players that can end up down a blind alley where he struggles to get out of it? Or is he someone that can really shake off his man and get that pace going? Because he's clocked as one of the fastest players in the league, and we know how strong he is as well. But part of that, when you go down that kind of alleyway, is decision making as well as strength and pace.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's a massive issue in terms of sort of going back down blind alleys. I think he will sort of get to where he's so direct. He sort of makes that decision and he more or less will stick to it. So if he's made the decision that he's going to go on the outside, it will more or less slow. Like, again, he might decelerate, then accelerate away from the man, and he will look to get that cross in. He'll have something in his mind already. I think where that maybe hinders him a little bit is that he's already made his mind up on what's going to happen. So when we're talking about decision making, perhaps he's already chosen that he's going to drill right to the byline and he's going to put it into the box. Whereas maybe he could make a different decision if he could just slow himself down and really take that time to make the decision. But as you say, he's powerful. He's a powerful carrier. He's quick. He's really effective in transition in terms of not only bringing the ball forward himself, but also, again, on the break with that speed. So he gives you a lot of different outlets playing as an actual direct winger and going on the outside of teams, on the outside of a block, which is important in the modern game and how teams set up.
Yeah, and do you think, given everything you've said now, this is a sale that Chelsea will regret? You said about him being someone that could potentially explode. That doesn't mean he will. There is potential there, and that's part of what Arsenal are paying for. But given the fact that you said he was Chelsea's best winger last year, do you think this is a signing that could potentially be regretted in 12 months' time?
Definitely potential for it to be, because I think that he has those raw qualities in terms of instincts as a shooter, as a scorer. I think that that's where he can really sort of develop and become a sort of 12 plus Premier League goal winger, or even 15, and he can raise to that level. The one reason I'm a little bit sort of safe with it with Arsenal is I do think he is much more favoured to that right side, and it will depend on a little bit of extra sort of coaching from Mikel Arteta and to see what he does with him, because if he has the idea to play him on the left more and to rotate him with Saka so he still gets some minutes on the right, like you don't really know the plan that Arteta has for him, but clearly there is one, because if he's quite heavy that he wants him, he's obviously got an idea of what he wants to do with him. And again, I think it's a price point thing. I think at 40 million, I would have said absolutely regret. Like even if it doesn't come off, I think it would have just been a silly risk to take. If it can raise to around the 55 to 60 mark, which I know around 50 is where it's actually sort of looking at the minute, then I think the risk becomes a little bit more, it makes a little bit more sense in Chelsea fans' heads, because you've got Esteval, because Pedro Neto's sort of coming into his own, and maybe he's not as good in terms of sort of output and what he can offer, but in terms of intangibles, he's probably a little bit more important to Chelsea now in terms of what he can offer off the ball, especially, and sort of his work rate. So definitely is one we could regret, because he could easily explode, and he's one that I have got quite high stocks in. So it's one that I'm quite sad to see go, because I think he could take that next step, but the price point is important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's a sticking point with both sets of fans. But we'll leave it there for part one. Could you tell everyone where they could find you and just a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so Connor Holden Football on YouTube, on Twitter, I think it's just Connor Holden, but Connor Holden 00 is the actual tag, I think. And then, yeah, just sort of I do Chelsea mainly because that's my club, but I try to cover as many different things as possible, mainly tactics, and sort of come from that analyst background. So really looking to sort of just keep pushing the content at a high level there.
Yeah, well, please give Connor a follow. I've been following him for a long time. I've learned a lot about Chelsea. It's always great to know a bit about other clubs as well as just Arsenal. So please drop him a follow. You'll learn a lot from him. If you've enjoyed the show, please hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel. We will be back again with part two very soon.